with you, those I've worked with, have probably heard me talk about Darren, because he's a guy that I take a lot of inspiration from. Really pleased that we met when I first got to Wellington in about I think it was about 95, 94, 95, and I started to play basketball. Darren had just stopped playing basketball at that point, and he coached the club team that I played for, and we took out a couple of local championships. So that was where we first met, and then over the years connected a bit more around business, and more recently, the last 5 or 6 years, I was very privileged. Darren invited me to come and do some work with his sales team, and with their customer team. So I had a little part for a year or so with Who's on Location. So great to have you here, Darren. As I think Angela's always a bit worried that I have a man crush on you. You are genuinely someone I look up to. I find you an inspiration in business and sales and life. So thanks for joining. Just another couple of bits of admin. I'll just let people know before we get underway. We are thinking. So I may not have said on the webinars before, but we're running these as seasons. This is episode 3 of season 1. We're going to do one more before Christmas. Thought we'd do it as an Ask Me Anything format. So Liz and myself, and on the call is also Angus Campbell. Angus also helps salespeople. He's a well-tenured and experienced sales guy, helps with sales process, sales strategy, sales consulting for organizations. So the three of us thought we'd jump on a call and just throw the questions open for anyone to put sales related questions to us. So look out for that invite. And in the follow-up questionnaire that Amy will send at the end of the meeting, there'll be a box there for you to put in any questions you'd want to ask at the time. And then, of course, on the day, you can ask any questions that come up as well. So look forward to having you all back for that. And then we'll look at all the feedback you've given us over the last 3 or 4 episodes, and we'll think about what we do for next year. So really open to ideas from people. What's valuable? What would you like help with? What makes the 30 minutes that you 40 minutes, 50 minutes that you give up valuable, and how do we do a great job with that? And the last thing is, I've been back involved in the meetup community in Wellington, going to the Wellington Leadership Meetup, and also some mountain biking meetups, and just sort of getting out there and doing some new things. And I had a couple of people suggest that we could do a B2B sales meetup. I'm happy to facilitate that. I don't want it to be a hearsay do you think it's not a sales, a genuine meetup. We'd probably look to do it in an office and not in a pub, so it's not a drinking session. It is actually a B2B sales session. We'd have a drink, we obviously have a beer or something towards the end of the day, and have a conversation. I'm happy to do that, happy to organise that, would love to do it. If people would value it and come along, that would be the first thing, and if it's done with a couple of other people, so it's not a sales thing for hearsay do to get new customers. So just have a think about that if that's something you'd like to be involved in. There's a lot of great tenured salespeople that come along. There's that come along to these calls. It'll be great to connect you up with some of the younger generation coming through and see if we can help improve the effectiveness of sales all the way through. So. That's the admin. Look out for that stuff. We are recording. Once we're underway, Amy is going to turn off everyone's videos so that the recording doesn't have everyone's photos on, just to help protect your privacy a little bit. But feel free to keep your videos on, and feel free to ask any questions as you come along, as we head along. Darren, thanks for coming. It's great to have you here to talking to people I know, people I don't know. Really pleased to connect you up. One of the things that often stands out with you is your passion for business and your passion for sales. Talk to us about when you first realized that was a thing. How old were you when you went, I like business, I like sales?
I was probably about 13 or 14, and I was living in Palmerston North. I was living in a suburb called Highbury. Probably still is at the time, real rough and ready sort of place, sort of like the Otara of Manawatu, no disrespect to Otara. And came across Christmas holidays, and I wanted to earn some more money to buy my first 10-speed rally. I think they're called Rally 10s or whatever, Rally 10. So I could bike to school. So I went to Awatapu College, which was about 4 miles up the road, and I was walking and I wanted to bike. So I spent some time got my father's lawnmower and started knocking on doors and selling lawnmower services. Jim's mowing before Jim was around, probably. And I did something outrageous for me. I did something like about $1,400 over like 6 weeks, which you're talking, I'm 57, right? So we're talking the best part of 40 years ago. And so that was a hell of a lot of money. And then from that point in time, I just had an absolute passion for, being my own boss, steering my own ship, and wanting to be in business.
And I know people will find you on LinkedIn, no doubt, and you did some time in the electrical industry. But what was your first job in sales, your first actual full-time job?
Yeah, so my very first job in sales was, if anyone can remember, the stock cars. So the stock car circuits, the Palmerston North Panthers, and there was the Nelson Wildcats or whatever, and they'd come to New Zealand. They'd come to Wellington. Come to Palmerston North. And at the end of that, at the end of the night, the drivers would go to a local pub, and it was the Featherston Tavern in Palmerston North. And what I did there was, my parents were running that pub, and they asked me to sit behind the bar. It was illegal for me to serve alcohol, but I could serve pies and things like that. And so my first sales job, believe it or not, was actually selling pies. And you think, well, you weren't selling them; they just come up to you and ask them. But no, I really had this gift for the gab for upselling them to the mince with cheese instead of just the mince. So that was my first sort of exposure to sales, outside of doing the lawn mowing. But my first corporate job, my first real job, was actually insurance, working for an insurance company. And I've got a few stories around that coming up, but that was my first role. A lot of cold calls, a lot of behind the sale.
Yeah, was that selling to consumers?
Selling to consumers, so B2C,
yeah.
selling life insurance, whole of life, term insurance, etc.
Yeah, tough gig, that stuff. I mean, I remember a guy back then telling me that there wasn't a no until he'd been told no 7 times. Like,
right.
that was a thick skin area. Although, as I've said before on this webinar, for those that don't know, Grant Simon's on this call. He always says there's no such thing as no. There's only yes with conditions. So we'll roll that out one till the end of time. And then you ended up in the electricity sector. No doubt you'll talk about this. That was where you won the Salesperson of the Year award, late 90s from memory. And then you transitioned into tech. And again, I'm sure you'll talk about that journey and how you ended up with the idea for Who's On Location. So, yeah. Any other moments along the way you'd want to reference you're not going to talk about in your slides?
The insurance industry was a real eye-opener for me, because I was very young. I think I was 19 when I went in, which was young for an insurance agent. I went into a Palmerston North office with people that were probably only in their 30s, but to me, they were like granddads. And but they were great mentors. So learning from people that were successful, not everyone in the office was successful, but learning from those and being prepared to be open-minded and not be a know-it-all 18-year-old or 19-year-old, wherever I was at the time. That was really crucial. But also understanding the power of networks was my first experience. So instead of selling insurance to one person at a time, which I did for the first year, I realized that if I got into groups of people, like all of the young all the young nurse students in the hostels in Palmerston North, if you walked in there and had sweet talk to maitre d', she'd give you access to 45 nurses over 3 hours.
Right,
and you could group sell them. So there are all these lessons I learned as quite a young sales guy, on how to leverage the power of network.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, hey, well, look, over to you. I won't say anything about Who's On Location and the journey. I'll leave that all to you to talk about. Suffice to say that, as we said in the invite, it's a business that you built, sold in 21 from memory to MRI Software, a US company that focuses on property management. But apart from that, I'll leave it to you. So I'll mute myself. Everyone, feel free to raise your hand or just jump in with questions as we go. But Darren, look forward to hearing what you've got to say.
Fantastic. So I'm assuming everybody can see the screen that I'm sharing. What I wanted to do was, I could just talk to the screen and tell you some stories, but I thought I'll bring up some imagery, probably more for prompts for myself, but just to add a little bit of flavor and color to what I'm talking about. But when David approached me, one of the key things I was keen to look at was talking about, sales culture, sales training, how we educate and rise sales to the top. But I thought about that, and I thought that's probably been done multiple times, and it's really David's space. And I was never a sales leader. I was more of a salesperson that had leadership behind me. So what I wanted to talk about was my journey through some anecdotal stories, things that have happened to me in my life that have sort of driven me to be successful in sales, both as a salesperson, but also as a business owner, founder, and then someone that's now exited. So the things that really drove me when I looked at those values were courage, dedication, honor, and hard work. Now, I could have swapped those out for many other things, but chose not to. Those are what really drive me. Just for those that don't know me, some of you may know, I know that George is on the line from Time 7. George, we haven't met. Very small world, my friends. My son Sam, his partner is Maria. who works with you, and I saw the pictures that she shared when you had that win. I think it was last week, so congratulations on that. But it's a very small world. But just a very quick 20 seconds about myself. Part Māori, English, German heritage. I'm a proud father and a husband, 3 wonderful kids. Real passionate All Blacks rugby fan, Michael Jordan fan. As you know, David mentioned that I played basketball, so I'm from that era where Jordan was king. Real passionate about red wine and whiskey, not to any negative detrimental effect, but just in terms of my what I really love, in terms of enjoying that with a steak, as an example, but just not at lunchtime. And I've always been interested in innovation, and therefore I'm a technology company founder. And I've had some success. So I won't really gloat about that. It's a little bit waving the flag for myself, but you can see it on the screen there. But over a 21-year journey, I guess one of the outtakes of here that I wanted to express was that success is built up over time, and I still believe that. I find it really difficult to fathom how people are so successful, and there's normally something behind it that tends to be negative if it's been done in a really short period of time, just a personal belief. So I was New Zealand Salesperson of the Year in 1999. And I followed those same values, courage, dedication, honor, and hard work my whole life. And 21 years later, for me, that's what underpins CEO Today Global Award winner for 2021 for Australasia. So I think sustainable success is really important when you're trying to establish your credibility. So I just wanted to share that with you before we move through. So when we think about courage, dedication, hard work, and honor, it really is a reflection of your personal character. And your character is your personal brand, and I really believe that is so important when it comes to sales. All of my experiences in the last, say, 3 or 4 years, whether I'm buying food from a restaurant, going to a movie, getting petrol, buying clothes, booking something online, trying to phone one of the call centers, Vodafone, One New Zealand, sorry, Spark or whoever. My engagement with those people, I judge people on how they are speaking to me, how they're holding eye contact, and all those sort of attributes that can add to character over time. But of course, they're quite short engagements. So us in sales, when we're engaging with people, generally we get more than 30 seconds to do that. So we get a chance to really show our character to people when we're selling. And so therefore, I think personal brand is important. Before I get into some of the storytelling, I just wanted to share with you some of the things that really are important to me. And some I just tried to sort of capture those, not so much in quotes, but sort of in statements that underpin what I think drive me as a salesperson and also as a business owner prior to sale. So I'm not going to read them out, but basically one of the key ones here that I really do like is persevere, because on the road to success there is never a crowd on the extra mile. And I think that speaks to honor. What I've found over many years, as I'm sure many of you have, is that when you're engaged in the sales process, you'll engage with customers that don't necessarily return that honor. You may have colleagues that aren't that honorable, they're always chasing the dollar first, to the point where they may even bend the truth a little. I've been in situations where people have literally sold customers vaporware that doesn't exist, but it's backed up by brochures. And I just found that, unfathomable that people would do that. So I think, again, just speaking to your character, I think honor and how you go about and how you conduct yourself is so important in sales, because people certainly remember. And we'll speak to this a little bit further as we go through. Just as an aside, David, just hold me to account on time. I believe I have about 30 minutes. So we're already 5 minutes through, so just let me know. What I will talk about is, what is courage? It takes, it does take courage to go for it. But you do miss, and you'll see quite a lot of quotes here from sports people, because I'm very sports orientated. You do miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so one of the things that I was aware of when I was younger was, whether it was by design or nature versus nurture, I'm really unsure. But I never saw barriers in front of me to take a shot at trying different things. And this really helped me in my sales career as I went through. So I'll talk about very quickly just sort of 3 critical, what I call them failures. They're failures in the sense that I've never made any money out of them. They cost me a lot of money, but they taught me a lot as I went through the process of building up a sales and a business career. So you see some funny things on the screen that they're more like prompts to myself to remember what story I want to tell. But in the early years, like straight after I started at Computer Associates, and not Computer Associates, sorry, Colonial Mutual Life Insurance, I ended up leaving that organization after 3 years. very successful in insurance, loved the job, but I wanted to run my own ship. So my mother lived in Hong Kong, and so through some contacts with her, I wanted to try importing chicken legs and chicken feet. And it's a weird thing to want to import when you're like 22, 23. But I gave it a crack. I ordered a 20-foot container of frozen chicken feet, and I went door to door selling these pre-selling them to all the restaurants in the lower North Island. And the process was that they came into the country, and I made my first sales. I think I bought for 10 grand, sold for 20, so made a reasonable profit. But then I got a call from I think it was Ministry of Ag and Fish at the time, and basically that put a stop to me doing that again. I hadn't followed some of the import procedures. That was back in the day when they probably weren't doing a great job at customs from stopping those feet coming into the country. Luckily, I didn't cause any food sickness or anything like that, but I was told to stop that. So the lesson I had that from the lesson I took away from that was understanding sort of like the legislative, the regulatory environment that I was operating in, regardless of what I was doing, what I was selling, what I was trying to build. Understanding that was incredibly important. Another thing that I did try was the security industry. So when I first came to Wellington was when I first met David. David, you won't know this, but I had this vision. There was a spate of car thefts in the Mount Vic area of Wellington, and the police weren't really addressing the problem. And so one of the things I wanted, nor was private security at the time. So I had this idea that what if every household in the Mount Vic area, Roseneath area, gave $20 a month to a private security firm, and they permanently put like a private police force onto that hill, right? That was Mount Vic and Roseneath. And it's a little weird to think about, but basically you pay $20 and you knew that within 2 minutes drive, there was always a security guard in the area. And they would just continually just go around the street and just in a vehicle, just monitoring for, suspicious activity. And so what I did was I basically put a letter in everybody's letterbox. And I can't remember how many it was, 3,000 or 4,000 houses got a letter from me. And unbelievably, with the offer that I was making, I was registered as a security guard. I did all the right things there. I had something like about a 30% uptake. So 30% of all the houses in Roseneath and Mount Vic put a $20 check in the mail and stuck it in a post office box at Wellington Station. And I just couldn't believe it was enough to buy the vehicle. It was fantastic. But then I was shut down before I even started because of the security industry came in and basically just sort of threw the legal book at me, even though I wasn't doing anything illegal, because I was going to be taking a piece of the business from them. So again, understanding the macro environment, understanding who you're hurting in business, what impact your sale or your business is going to have on an industry, sometimes can be negative, and therefore you're courting enemies. So understanding that was an early learning for me, before I was 25. And the last one I would take away from things that I tried. So I was trying to take shots, and I missed a lot of them. Was a business idea that I had where, for those that are old enough to remember this, when you traveled overseas, we used to photograph our passports, and we used to put a copy of it maybe in our bag or in our suitcase. If you lost your passport, the theory was you had a copy of it and you take it along to the nearest embassy or the police station, and somehow you could figure out a way to get your passport renewed or reprocessed. And so I had an idea that if I could convince every solitary travel agent in all of New Zealand to photograph everybody's passport as part of the service of selling them travel, and this is way before online travel, then they could upload that to a website, so a cloud. So we're talking 22 years ago. They could upload that to the cloud, and then all the client had to do, we'd give them a password and a username and password, and if they ever lost their passport, they could just log into the service and there'd be a copy of their passport. And we ended up with about 400 travel agents in New Zealand signed up. We ran for about 3 weeks, and we had, I can't remember, it was like several thousand passport copies were loaded up to our service. And then about a week later, it stopped. And I couldn't understand why. There was just no sales coming through. And the government had launched a new service in New Zealand where you didn't have to do that anymore. You could just register. All of you have traveled overseas. So when you travel overseas now, you register that you're going overseas, and you can register with Ministry of Ag and Fish, not Ag and Fish, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that where you're going to London. So none of my service was suddenly not required. So again, the lesson there in the process was see if, when you're doing a service that really, say, the government should be doing or somebody else should be providing, is understanding what's on their radar, what's on their roadmap, how they're thinking. So anyway, A long time to spend on one slide in a short amount of time, but I just wanted to share with you some of the mistakes that I made and some of the lessons that I took away from that. Of course, courage is not being afraid to ask. So what's driven me is I've never been afraid to ask questions, but I forgot about this when I was a business owner. So as a business owner and in software, over my 12-year journey, by about year 3, I started getting courted by VC firms, private equity firms to invest in our company or acquire us. I literally took hundreds of calls, and I would sit there and the calls would go, "Hi, my name's Margaret Miller. I'm an associate with, say, Mercury Fund based in Houston. We've been looking at your sector. We think it's a growth industry. We're looking to invest in a business like yourself. We think you fit the picture. Could you, would you be prepared to spend 15 minutes with me answering some questions?" And of course, I'd always say yes, because I was naive and stupid. And I would sell my soul. So I would tell them what my revenue was and how we were growing and what our roadmap was. And what I found out was I never ever got investment. So whereas I had a competitor that raised 100 million in the US, another one in Europe that raised 7 million euros, and we hadn't raised anything other than high net worth capital from high net worths here in New Zealand, but I never raised that significant capital. And what I understood almost at the 11th hour of my company, like year 11 out of 12 before I sold it, was that I'd forgotten to play the game that they were playing, to understand it. So I wasn't asking the right questions of these people. I was selling my soul, but I was never asking them what their buying criteria was, what was the criteria of the type of company they wanted to, what revenue would they need to have. What I found out later was that all these companies were doing was that they were about to make a decision on investing in one of my competitors. And their job was to understand the competition. So by phoning people like me who would sell their soul, and all of my competitors have been guilty of this, all the money was actually going somewhere else. So the lesson there that I learned was, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions. It takes courage. And if you're in sales, asking the hard question of your customer, and this is all Challenger stuff, whether it's Challenger, Spin, Taz. Taz is a bit old now, I think, but that type of sales process that you're involved in, asking your buyer the tough questions you need to know to understand to be able to qualify the sale is so important. I'd certainly forgotten it, but certainly picked up on it on the last year I was in business, and it never held me back from there. Of course, we ended up with an exit within 12 months, so we understanding that process a little bit more. Just as an aside, on one of the trips, these trips actually, quite often I would do these types of calls with buyers at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, did them for years. But one of them asked me to fly to New York and to meet them. So I had some business with a partner in Washington, DC, and I had to change my flights and I couldn't get on the flight. So I had to figure out, how do I get to New York within 24 hours, which is relatively easy to do. But the problem was there were no flights. There was just nothing I could book. So I decided to take the train. And when I took the train, I was in business class because I offered a meal. So I was traveling at like 8 at night, got in at like, I don't know, 11 at night or midnight into New York. And I was the first person on the train, apart from some old grey-haired guy that was sitting by himself with 2 big burly-looking security guards sitting next door to him. So believing in my own mantra about you're never too afraid to ask, I did at some stage manage to take a look at who this guy was, and I did manage to ask him what he thought of New Zealand. And I'm not necessarily into his politics or anti his politics, but it was just a great opportunity that I wanted to share with you, because it taught me that, it didn't teach me, I already knew this, but when opportunity knocks, be ready to answer the door. And the opportunity that knocked was an opportunity for me to share a photograph with my kids that they would recognize of just something that Dad was doing while he was away. While I was away, on my journey of 12 years, I missed 7 birthdays of my daughter and 5 of Sam, my son. And so that takes a mental toll on you. So quite often taking the opportunity to share things with them when the opportunity provided itself was quite useful in terms of keeping that energy alive with my kids back home. And of course, I've actually got quite a few different opportunities I could have shown you on this, but that was one I just wanted to share because it's quite relevant today. Interesting guy to talk to. He actually gave me about 15 minutes of his time, which is quite good. I wanted to talk about the price of success. So, I'm not going to go through courage, dedication, hard work, and honor in any particular order. But I love this quote: the price of success is hard work, dedication to the job at hand, and the determination that whether we win or lose, we have applied the best of ourselves to the task at hand. And so I want to talk about, hard work and determination. I do recall that in the insurance days, when I first started with Colonial Mutual Life, my mentor said to me, Darren, if it's going to take, you need to do 10 phone calls to get an appointment. That's what we here in the office have to do. And these were guys that have been doing it for 5 to 10 years. You'll probably have to do 5 appointments to get 1 sale. And on average, the average commission rate for a sale back in the day was about $200. So if you want to make $200 a week, you're all on commission. You had to do 10 phone calls that would result in 5 appointments that would give you 1 sale. And I wanted to make $1,000. I had this ambition way back in the day that I wanted to make $1,000 a week. And that was a fortune back then. Like, houses were like, I don't know, 100 grand a house in Palmerston North. So, it was a lot of money to make $1,000 in a week. But then I was told, well, if you want to do that, Darren, you're going to have to make 5 sales. That's going to require you to get 25 appointments, and that's going to require you to do 250 phone calls. So I mentioned, David, you were mentioning earlier about no. You have to take a lot of no's. And that was absolutely the case with myself. You're one step closer to a yes. And so what I've got this quote up here from Michael Jordan, another sports reference, about how he's missed 9,000 shots in his career. He's lost 300 games. 26 times he was trusted to take the game when he shot and he missed. And he's failed over and over again in his life. And for me, doing those phone calls, I just failed over and over and over again. But what I understood was, in order to not have to do 250 phone calls to make 5 sales, what if I really took the time to understand what I was doing wrong, every word that I said on the phone call, the type of people who I was calling. I was really young for a sales rep, as I say, way back down in 19, 20, and 21, I think, when I was there. And they could hear it in my voice. So I was trying to phone people like David, who's in his 50s and married, and he's got this young kid talking to him about a life-changing thing like insurance. So I recognized that I had to speak to an audience that resonated with me, that believed what I believed, and that was people my own age. So that segued right back to, I ended up approaching groups of people that dominated with a profile of those people were more like my age. So the Linton Army Camp, and I had high success there. The nursing school had high success there, getting young nursing students who were just spending money at the Fitz, at the pub and having a great time. I got them to focus some money on their future savings for their future life. So again, the insurance story there for me was, if I carry on perfecting my art, then I'll become a better salesperson over time and reducing the amount of effort I have to put in to get the result. And with our friend Richie, we all know that story about Richie. There's not a hidden story. 148 test matches, 131 wins, but we do recall in 2007 he failed. For those that have read his book, he speaks deeply and with a lot of evidence around the fact that he failed in 2007, I think it was, and everybody criticized him. But how he adapted to address that was he changed his mind to say, instead of being fearful of losing, it's just another opportunity to get that win. And that's what I took. One of the things I would take from that, and I've imparted to several salespeople, is when you lose a sale, just always reflect on. And this is, I'm speaking to the, I'm telling you guys how to suck eggs, but that's effectively what I've always taken throughout my life. Every time I failed, is take the opportunity, learn from that, and progressively make progress. So just in terms of other lessons that I've learned, I was asked some time ago what was my superpower, because someone had read my profile, and I said, well, actually, it's perseverance. It is not being a great salesperson. It's not being a leader. It's not, being able to raise some capital. It wasn't luck. It wasn't technology. It's actually just perseverance, like being able to do things over a period of time. And one of the things that I had gone through that it was a harsh lesson for me was when I started selling my own product on location, Who's on Location, into the New Zealand market, was I recognized that how could I clone myself to double sales? How could I do that overseas? So what I realized was I needed to have channel partners and a reseller model that would allow me to actually grow my business using the network effect. And so one of the things, the early lessons that I did was I was shaking hands and courting so many partners. And one of the biggest security companies in the world I'd approached, and they were really interested in selling our product, which is, for those that don't know, on location, we track people going through buildings. So we're like a security product. We have a combination of visitor, contractor, and employee presence management inside a single app. Really successful, 62 countries we're in. But our genesis was obviously here in New Zealand. Anyway, I approached a large security company, and what happened was that the executives at the table were incredibly excited about what I was bringing to the table, that their salespeople could then go and sell. And what I discovered was if I was able to do $100,000 of business every couple of months selling myself, surely these 30 salespeople, even if they were terrible, would do equally that, if not 10 times that. Well, after a year, the total amount of revenue I'd received from these salespeople from the partner was zero. I actually hadn't received one solitary sale. So what I discovered, the lesson that I'd learned there was that understanding that when you're selling to multiple people. So I know that a number of you have heard from David and you've done the Challenger course and various other sales training, but that classic, I only sold to the executives. I didn't actually sell to the people that were actually going to do the selling. Was a classic lesson learned from me, learned by me harshly, because I'd spent probably $50,000 building several relationships with partners and then didn't go on to sell. But I also understood that I've got to understand who my salespeople are that are representing my brand and how they're compensated, how their commission structure works, so that to make sure that we align with that. And so, lesson there was do business with people who believe what you believe, and also what I really understood to be understanding that I'm selling to more than one person within an organization. However, the process of continuous improvement. So the courage to ask questions, having a lot of failures throughout my career, starting my business, Who's on Location. We have had some incredible success. And of course, even before I started the company, I had some significant success in sales in my life. But one of the most rewarding things that I did was taking everything that I'd learned, and we had this opportunity where one of the largest companies in the world wanted to sell a service that we provided. And I had several competitors in the UK, around the world. One of them already did multi-language. This client was European based, they're in London. They had a sales force all over Europe. And what they were looking for was a visitor management system that was multi-language, that would solve a whole bunch of problems, and that their 10,000 strong reseller market and direct sales force would be able to resell. And we were really excited about this, but I sat back and I thought, this is going to be really, really difficult. We're up against a player that's in Europe that already has people on the ground. We were something like a 10-person company. And the American competitor we had $100 million in the bank, and their executives would fly over. And long story short was that when I flew over to London, and it was my turn to get my 1.5-hour presentation in front of their executive board, there's only 5 companies in the world that were selected to present. The process that I went through, what I discovered was that none of my competitors had sent their CEO, sent their founder, they'd sent their local salesperson. And I knew what they'd done when they were salespeople. They would have opened up the app and shown them how the application worked, how that product actually worked. And what I decided to do was I spent the entire hour and a half telling stories, explaining to the executives of this organization that we understood their brand, that we understood that they wanted to deliver value to their thousands of customers around Europe, and that in order to protect your brand, you want to have a product that you can trust, that manages the security correctly, that has death by 1,000 cuts. We have wisdom by 1,000 cuts. So I shared some of the wisdom, some of the learnings, that they told us that they wanted the product to do this, and we told them why that would be a bad idea because of the thousands of stories that we had ourselves. And so I was so pleased that I flew back from London and we were selected, and we never presented the product. And it's worth millions of dollars to us over time. And to sell a product without showing the product is a lesson for me. That I don't say that that's something you would always do, but it shows me the power of not just storytelling, but being able to cleverly articulate the value of what you do and the problem you're helping them solve, and how you're going to go about that by sharing experiences with people. And so I always used to say a phrase, I tell you why I love my business. And then I'd carry on to say, I love my business because, and depending who my audience is, I would be able to share a story with them about how we helped a similar customer solve a similar problem and why we were good for them. But anyway, a story about winning a very significant piece of business without ever showing them the product. just a one little thing I wanted to segue here, just conscious of time, another 8 minutes. When I was asked for exclusivity, I just wanted to share this with you. We've given you the deal, we want to be exclusive. It's quite scary to give someone exclusivity. So if you're in sales and someone wants to buy your product and they want you to do a custom piece of work to it, whether it's at Time 7, whether it's at Computer Associates, or whether it's at Coca-Cola, wherever you work, you'll quite often be tempted to, just from the sheer volume of the value of the deal you're doing, that they might want some tweaks. And one of those might be they want to be exclusive. They don't want anyone else or their competitors to sell it. So one of the things I shared with them was basically this statement. We don't do exclusive deals, but we only have the capacity to work with one party right now, and that is you. We really value you. We want them to feel special. So let's get this done. And your challenge is to force us to go exclusive through the sheer force of your success for us. So we didn't want to go exclusive with them, but we wanted them to force us to force that on us, because at that point in time, they hadn't sold anything. So that was just something that I picked up from somebody else, and it helped me really address multiple demands for exclusivity on our product in certain territories around the world. Just a little bit about honor. Really only have one slide on this because we all know what honor is, but basically it's everything about, it's truthfulness, doing what you say you're going to do. But for me, your promises are your brand. Your promises, your brand, yourself. That's what it is. And what I've discovered is that, the smallest of opportunities in your pipeline or in your customer base can actually destroy your brand. Every engagement you have with people, you are being judged. And I used to say to my support team that, because when you sell anything, typically the salesperson might put them on, say, the Wendy Evans 90-day sales cycle for customer touch. So you sell something to someone, and then you'll follow up maybe the next week, and then every 90 days you might give them a phone call, or your customer success team will give them a phone call. Typically, particularly in software, the people that have the biggest engagement with your customers after you've sold them something is your onboarding team and then your customer support team moving forward. So I've always made sure that my customer support team, we view customer support as the biggest investment you can make, the best investment you can make in marketing. And because today, if you were to annoy a customer, if I go back 20 years, if you annoyed a big brand like Coca-Cola and they decide to cancel you and make a big noise about it, there's not much they could really do. You could lose that deal, but you wouldn't necessarily lose other deals because of it. But now, because we have Facebook and social media, we have product review sites and what have you, even the smallest customer that's paying you $500 a year, say for software in my world, if they can jump on social media, they can destroy your brand, and that can resonate right through the entire network that you have of your customer base. So the lesson I learned as I went through business was treat everybody the same, treat them as the most highest value customer you can, and it's always stood me in good stead. I guess that's the lesson that I've learned there. I'm not a big fan of, we're going to provide silver, bronze, and gold support, because that immediately means that typically that the customer is going to get serviced. That customer will be serviced before that one. But as I said, that one is on bronze because they're a small customer. They can wait 5 days. The problem is that 5 days can destroy your brand because of the power of social media. So that's a takeaway from me over the last 12 years. A couple of other stories I wanted to share with you around my values was the value of hard work and how it can pay off over time. In the early days of OnLocation, one of the things I wanted to do about my third customer experience was I approached one of the large supermarket chains, and they were really keen to understand how often their merchandisers and suppliers were coming into the store. So I showed them our product and explained how we could work together. And what happened was that they said, yep, set up a trial. So I set up the trial. I can't name the store or the brand, but there's only a couple in the country. So take your pick. But what I did there at the store was I turned up for 4 straight weeks, did 91 hours a week. I was there at something like 5 in the morning till about 6 or 7 at night. And I just watched and observed how every solitary person used our software, how they engage with it. So these were truck drivers, bread delivery guys, merchandisers, a lot of people that technology wasn't the first thing that they would ever use. This is way before iPads were even popular. Touchscreen technology was even popular. So watching people learn how they engage with our software was a great learning lesson for me. It taught me that I've got to increase the font size because people can't necessarily see small fonts. That every every 30th person that uses it, you got to wipe the screen because the fingerprints will stop a touch screen working, because it gets a bit oily or gooey with human oil, literally. So understanding that. Lesson for me here was we did 28,000 people walked into this one supermarket over, this is not customers, this is suppliers, 28,000 times that month. People had walked in there. We gave this amazing report and presentation to the head office, who said yes. And then they wanted to put out a purchase order. And a couple of weeks later, I was still waiting, and I went back to them. And what happened was that they said, oh, we've gone with somebody else. One of our other supermarkets, same chain, but one of the other stores in the South Island was already using a product. And I knew the product, and it was pretty average at best. But they were highly influential, the South Island operation, on the global, on the national decision making that happened. And so again, the lesson that I learned there was hard work doesn't always pay off, but you can take away a lot of lessons from that. And again, the lesson I took away from that was understanding I should have sold not to the store owner. I should have been selling and understanding the stakeholders and the influencers and all those that are in the decision making tree at this particular organization. So learning from failure, again, always been a mantra for me, but again, another quote from this time from Muhammad Ali. And so I just want to take you to a quick last couple of wrap-up ones around the early days. I was also selling for Coca-Cola. One of my first jobs that I had when I got back from playing basketball in the States was representing Coca-Cola. And when I was in the Manawa 2, and they gave me the Schweppes brand, and the Schweppes at the time was something like around about 8% market share. And the rest of it was owned by Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Coca-Cola slightly ahead. And they asked if I could take on the Schweppes brand and build sales without affecting Coca-Cola. I could only attack the Pepsi brand. And it's basically measured by facings. So how many facings your product has on a supermarket shelf, or how many items you can sell through dairies and supermarkets. And so what I did was I started to understand what was influencing buyer behavior. So one of the things that I learned really early was not just understanding your product, but understanding what drives people to buy that product, and understanding the bigger macro market and the economic and the geopolitical influences that can impact the sale of any particular product or service. And believe it or not, this sounds really obvious, but say in the wealthy areas, what I discovered was that the previous Coca-Cola rep or Schweppes rep had lots of Coke on the top shelf and a little bit of ginger ale and tonic water at the bottom, and Pepsi had a couple of shelves. And I realized that people would always buy Coke. If they wanted Coke, they're not going to suddenly go inspirationally go, oh, I don't feel like Coke, I'm going to buy tonic water. They would look for the Coke. So if you want to increase the sales, you're not going to decrease the sales of Coke by moving Coke down a couple of shelves. But if you wanted to increase the sales of Schweppes, you want to put it at eye level. And so that's what I did. I basically went to wealthy areas and I swapped out the mix of Coca-Cola and Schweppes based on the fact that people in wealthy areas drink gin and tonic, right? And brandy and dry. And then I went to the lower socioeconomic areas where they might have a poor mix. And I'd say, let's get rid of the tonic. Let's leave it down to one facing and raise the profile of the Fantas and the sparkling duets and things like that. And that resulted, long story short, that resulted in a 37% market share of Schweppes. We're going back some years ago now in the lower North Islands, and got me a lot of promotions. And I really enjoyed that opportunity. But the takeaway there was really understanding how people think emotionally about buying things, and not just looking at the obvious, which would be, let's just put all the Coke on top and everything else will just sell itself. It's understanding the science and the psychology and the emotion behind sales. Sorry, Dave, just a little bit over. I just wanted to share, just the last slide, I think, was a story that I wanted to share with you. When I did 26,100 miles, a round trip, 31 hours, 40 minutes of flight time to get somewhere, and they gave me 3 minutes. And that was never on the cards when I left. And it was for a pitch to a potential systems integrator in Boston. And it was snowing. And I left the Boston hotel at 2 PM for a 4 o'clock meeting. And it was only about 8 kilometers away. And I was told by Uber that it would take an hour. So I gave myself 2 hours. Long story short, it took 2 hours and 8 minutes. So I'd already contacted the customer to say I was running late and I'd be about 5 to 15 minutes late. And I was 8 minutes late. Well, the CEO didn't bother turning up because I was late by 8 minutes, took it as a slight, even though it was snowing outside. And so what I learned, and I was given, like, in that particular situation, I was given like 3 or 4 minutes to do a pitch. And I'd flown all that way for that effort. And the lesson I learned from that, was, do business with people that, that believe what you believe, and really qualify that customer before making that ridiculously expensive trip for no reason whatsoever. And I actually did the same thing again on an earlier year, where I was asked to go and pitch for capital in Austin, Texas, and then also in San Francisco. And it's sort of a subsidized trip, but again, it was the same sort of hours, same sort of flight, same result. You got on stage and we were told that we had 7 minutes, but when we got on stage, they said they were running out of time. You have 2 minutes to do your pitch. So you're prepared. So you prepare as much as you can. But when you get told that your 7 minutes pitch is now going to go down to 2 and you're flying all that way, it's tough. So lesson learned was have a backup plan, always be flexible, and be prepared to change as you go through the process. Dream big, start small, but most of all start. I love that quote from Simon Sinek. It's always held me in good stead. And just a couple of other things I just wanted to share. David asked me to share a couple of things that what books have inspired you. So he will share this with you later on, but for me it was Richard Branson's Screw It, Let's Do It. An older guy like myself who just took note, just dropped all the barriers and attacked everything. If he wanted to do it, he would. Never Split the Difference is a great negotiating book from Chris Voss. I guess many of you have looked at that. On the far right, The Business of Belief by Tom Asseker. It's just fantastic about how leaders, marketers, and salespeople get you to believe things, which is why belief is a big part of my mantra. And the third one along, Wild Swans, is actually nothing to do with business, but a fantastic story that I read in my youth, my teens, I think, maybe my late teens, early 20s. There was a journey of discovery, of overcoming adversity. And that was one of the things that really drove me to always overcome adversity, was actually the book Wild Swans, and to not back down and always find a way to progress. And the last thing was, Dave asked me if there's any podcasts that I watched that actually challenged me. So I've just shared those on the screen with you. Some of them are quite, people don't like the politics of some of these people, but I love Joe Rogan because he interviews some really interesting people and I always learn from him. And also Modern Wisdom, Chris Williamson. So thanks, guys. It's been fast and hectic, and I'll just stop sharing my screen now. Just bear with me. And open to any questions.
There I was. Yeah, thanks, Darren. Questions, anybody? We've got one from someone who couldn't make it, who's going to watch the recording, Richard Drake, to those that know him, and we'll get to that question shortly. But does anyone have any questions for Darren? Just unmute yourself or pop it in the chat, and we'll pick it up from there. While you do that, I think that's I love that picture of you with Joe Biden. That was when he was vice president to Barack Obama. Is that right?
It was 2018, and I think that was when Trump was in. Yep. So he was between jobs, I guess. Mind you, he had big security guards, so he obviously had. I guess you get that for life when you were him. Yeah, absolutely. I love that story about the supermarkets too, and one of the things that you alluded to, but also glossed over, is that the supermarket didn't really need to know who was on site to know who was on site. That wasn't the purpose. The purpose there, and I don't think you mentioned this, was that the merchandisers, they had contractual obligations to be at this, and so the supermarket was at. That they weren't buying presence management, they were buying essentially a contract fulfillment measurement tool, right? So when we're talking the challenger sale, or we talk about understanding the priority, what is it the business is trying to achieve? Supermarket X weren't trying to count people; they were trying to achieve contract compliance. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to literally be there at 5 a.m. till 6 or 7 at night, 31 days in a row, and not be offered a single coffee. Not be asked anything by the store, and to put all that effort in, and then to lose it through internal politics was really frustrating. But I lost it. That was my fault. But I took away massive learning. So I got to see how people that aren't white collar workers, right? Because you think about visitor management, most of you have signed into some type of system multiple times around the world. Now it's all QR codes. Most of it's white collar staff doing that. So learning how non-white collar workers would use the software was a great learning for me. So I didn't see it as I saw it as a loss, but a lot of learnings.
Yeah. Question here from Paul. Thanks, Paul. You sound like your role as a part product manager, salesperson. Is that the mix you need? I guess it's as a founder, you were the product manager and the salesperson.
Yeah, I was both for the first about 3 years, and then we were able to we got big enough to hire a specialist salesperson, and we've been blessed with some wonderful salespeople. I don't know if James is on the call, but he still works for us, and he's been fantastic. Yeah, but also absolutely, I've been a product, but now I'm actually a product manager. So I was acquired, and instead of retiring, I actually wanted to, with honor, when I sold the business, they asked me, why should we buy you? Why do you want to sell, Darren? Like, is there some secret that we don't know about? This is the buyer, right? And I said to them that I wanted to become part of a bigger engine so that we can truly realize the vision and the mission of what we wanted to do. We just simply can't do it without being part of a bigger engine. So it'd be a bit disingenuous of me with no honor to then take the money and walk. I've stayed. I'm 3 years into it. MRI is a fantastic company to work for, and we're slowly getting there.
Awesome. And look, I'll add to that, because I have personal experience with Darren's honour on this. My wife and I were lucky enough to be very late investors in Who's On Location. And when Darren sold the business, he messaged the shareholders, or he certainly said to me, I don't know if he messaged shareholders, correct me if I'm wrong, just saying that even though you could have left at that point, because there was a bit of earn-out for us, that you wanted to be there for the year for those that had backed you to make sure they had the best possible chance of earning the earn-out. So, for the benefit of people on the call, thank you, Darren. But for the benefit of people on the call, Darren really lived by that value and dug in hard to make sure that those that had backed him got the best possible return. George, good question. As a young salesperson, so I guess thinking back to your insurance days or around then, as a young salesperson working with people at least twice my age, what's the best way to build credibility?
The best way to build credibility. So you're the young salesperson, and you're selling to people that are older.
That would be right for George. So he would be selling to people that are older, and he would also be competing with people who are older. So yeah, how do you get credibility with your customers?
Yeah, the term "meet the market's" not the right thing, but first of all, when I was selling insurance, I was literally so young. They were all in suits, so I had to go out and buy a suit. So I became one of them. So I adopted their DNA, right? So be true to yourself. But one of the things I would say is adopt their DNA, how they carry themselves, particularly those that you look up to. So what you want to do is, I found that I always, particularly as someone I always try to find a mentor. I've always tried to find someone that was a leader, that was the top dog. Who's the top dog in the office? What do they do? And I'm not saying mirror them, because you've got to be your own person, but understand their traits, understand their habits, and see what they do. And hopefully, if they're forthcoming, they're going to share some of their traits with you. But effectively, for credibility, with salespeople, credibility comes from making sales, right? Like, there's nothing. I've got to be quite blunt about that. Like, you've got to make the big sale, and you got to do it largely by yourself. So it's just a time in the saddle thing. I'd like to tell you that here's the 4 things to do to get credibility, but really, it starts with how you conduct yourself in the office, that you are willing to learn, and then you hit sales as fast as you can. I mean, it's just as simple as that.
You referred to a couple of things in there that showed that even though Challenger Sale wasn't invented, you would have been found in that research, and that you taught customers things. So this is to George's question. You taught customers things that they didn't necessarily know about their own business, right? So
yeah.
You talked about when you went to London and you presented to that group, and you told them stories about what you'd learned from the thousands of other people that had used your product. So you were able to help them avoid issues that they hadn't necessarily seen. I think one of the examples there was they wanted kiosks, didn't they? And one of the things you taught them is that if they had a group of 30 people arriving at their office, for them all to sign in individually was just a massive hurdle to adoption. So showing how easy a kiosk is great one-on-one, but not great, whatever the story was. So I think, George, that's one of the things. Like, make sure that you're teaching those customers something about their business based on your experience of dealing with so many others, and your area to support their business. That's ultimately the way you build credibility.
I would add to that also and say that, like, is it that particular example, but this would happen with almost every sale I've made since the internet was available to me. I really researched who I was selling to. So I wasn't going to go to London with no backing, and no one on this call would do it either. They all would do their research, but I would research the LinkedIn profiles of everyone on the executive table. You know, what their loves were, what their passion was. So when I'm speaking to them, there could be 20 people in the room, and I would turn around and I would say something like, you know, so as I mentioned before, I think it was James, sorry, James or George, you know, how was that steak sandwich? So out of the blue, you've been listening to conversations, you've done your research, and you might turn around to a customer and go, so take someone like Michelle in finance, Michelle, and so she's one of the people in the room or on the call. There's 20 others. No one's introduced you to her. They haven't done around the table, but you've suddenly pointed someone out because you recognized her from the LinkedIn profile, and you bring them into the story. Right. So I think that's really important. You do your research on the people, you do the research on the company, on their metrics. I'm talking about the big deals. You're not going to do this for a $500 deal, but if you're going for a 50, 100, 200, 500, $1 million deal, these are the sorts of things that actually can make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's all part of your hard work value, right?
Yeah.
Just got to do the mahi. Grant, your question there. Thanks, Darren. You seem to refer to learning as a strong capability that has given you an advantage.
Absolutely. I never am, but I always try to be one of the smartest people in the room. Not so that you can lord it over someone else. The smartest person in the room is often the one that's not even talking, right? Like is just quiet and they're back in the background. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Try and just know. You constantly learn about everything about your industry, or even just things that generally, you know, have a that resonate with you. It doesn't matter whether it's even if you, so right now I'm a founder that's exited. I'm a product manager for the APAC region, but I'm doing everything I can to learn about blockchain, crypto, AI, machine learning, politics, everything, because it all seems at some point in time will come back and help you in the sales process.
Great, thank you. Now, Amy, have you got the question there from Richard? Here we go. You've just put it in. Perfect timing, ready minds. Richard couldn't make it. He asked, working for multinationals frequently comes with big sales targets. What's your advice for keeping strong ethics while trying to hit someone's unrealistic target? There's a good one.
Yeah,
we've all experienced that one.
Excuse me, yes. So, first of all, I would never, ever compromise on my values and my principles. I would just never do it. But I don't see them as mutually exclusive. So when someone's giving me a target that's unrealistic, if I've applied my own learnings, I know more about the market than my boss. I read all the macro papers, the white papers, what's going on with office occupancy in New York, right? It's a paper from JLL or, or PwC or Deloitte's. If you have that knowledge, then, and you understand the market and where the market's going. So if you're in housing, if you were selling, I don't know, if you're selling something like, I can't even think fast enough, but if you understand that industry so well, then you can have a mature conversation with the person setting that target to say, here's a reason why I believe this target is unrealistic. I'm prepared to accept the target and give it my best, but here's why I believe it's unrealistic. And if I want to share this with you, because you yourself are obviously being given this target. Everyone's in a ladder, right? Everyone's in the food chain. And so I don't want you to miss your targets. I want to help you understand why I believe the market's not going to allow us to get this target. And that's what I would do. I mean, I myself personally, I've been in a situation where I had to compromise my values and I walked away from it. I was in an organization that I've been in there 4 weeks. I was paid $90,000 a year as a base salary. I'd been there for 4 weeks. I was asked to do a presentation and they'd give me a bluebird. Now, bluebird was, I didn't start the sale. The sales guy that did had left and they said, we can't close this deal. You're from a related industry in your historical life. If you can help us close this deal, you get the commission. And on week 6, we did the deal. And on week 8, I got my second pay. So 90 grand divided by 12 less tax. I got my salary. There was a brown envelope on the desk and I opened it up and I read it. And I went into the CFO and I said, you've miscalculated my sales, my commission. He goes, you didn't read the commission paper, did you? How it works? I said, no, I was so keen to get into this industry. I just signed. I mean, the commission document, how it's calculated was seriously like size 8 font, 40 pages. So I just signed it. He said, what's the problem? I said, well, it looks like it's wrong. And I turned it around and I showed it to him. He said, no, you'll get the other half next month. He thought I was complaining about the fact I didn't get my full commission. I was going in there to say, this is ridiculous. I've got $40,000 in my bank account. But he'd been here 6 weeks. and I thought it should be 4,000. And so I'm going in there to say, I've got to give you 36 grand back. And he's telling me, no, the other 40 comes next month. That story, you sit there and you go, well, how much did you make in the first year working for them? I did like 350 grand. And this is over 20 years ago. That's serious money, right? You're buying a house in 1 year. I found out later that some of the people I'd sold to, last 10 seconds, I'd sold it to them. They were using really dubious tactics like fake references and things like that. And so I felt I'm selling stuff to people that's vaporware and using fake references. So I'm leaving this company. And so I did. And I said to my wife, I had to sit her down saying, this company that is like, could make us millionaires in 3 or 4 years the way I sell, I'm going to walk away from it. So values never compromise.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question from Richard, and it's, but he's not here. But will no doubt ask me anything. This will come up again. But I think there's a couple of elements to the values stuff. I think that we should always we have our personal values, right? So you've got dedication, dedication, honor, hard work, and jeepers, I've forgotten the fourth one already. That's terrible.
So courage, dedication,
courage, dedication.
Yeah.
Honor and hard work. And so it doesn't matter what they are for each individual. We have a very strong value at Hearsay Do about helping people. Darren has that as well. That was the genesis of your business. How do you know people are out of a building in an emergency? I think that was one of the stories from another time. But so you got to hold true to those. But there is also this element in sales of timing, territory, and target. And sometimes you can do the hard work. You can be in the right place. You can do everything that's in your power, but you still come, 8th in the 100-meter sprint at the Olympics. You're not on the podium. You don't win the race. So I would echo. Richard, when you watch this on the recording, and for everyone else, I'd echo what Darren said, holding true to your values that are the values around character, like who you are when no one's looking is what character is. What will you do the right thing then when no one else sees what you do? That stuff shouldn't be compromised. If it's down to just the target is unrealistic, then bringing some science and analysis to it, as Darren said, is really important. But just recognise personally that timing, territory, and target, those are the three things together that often can determine, whether you've done well. And backed up by Darren's story, you banked that first 40 grand commission check based on timing and territory, right? You landed in the right place at the right time to bank that. Okay, any last? One more here from Claire. Thanks so much for the talk, Darren. How would you focus on your competitors, finding out who they are, how to have an edge over them, etc.? How valuable is that to do?
It's really interesting because I grew up, when I was doing insurance, I got sent on some very Americanized insurance sales training. The assumptive close, all those cliches you did back in the, way back, it probably developed in the 70s, but I was learning them in the 80s and 90s. And you had to know your competition. So I've been brought up, so you must understand everything about your competition. I actually found it's useful to know who your competition is and at a high level what they offer. But actually, for me personally, I felt I'm far better putting the energy into what we offer and the value that we bring. But I always want to know what my competition provides, because there's been times in my life where we don't meet the requirements. The 80-20 rule, very, very seldom does a product 100% meet the requirements of the people you're trying to sell it to. So you typically win business and you are the closest to 100% fit, right? You were 92%, the competition was 80%. I've found situations where we were 60%, someone else was 90%, and I knew it because I knew my competition, not intimately, but I just inherently knew that from research. So I would respect that and say to the client, I really believe that to meet your requirements, you should be looking at this product. I'd love to do business with you, but that's, so from understanding what your competitors do, I found that useful, and it maintains your integrity and your honor and your character. And I've had that happen to me multiple times. And those people 4 years later have popped up and said, hey, I did business with you several years ago. We didn't choose you, but I understand you're working here now. What would you recommend? So then you move from trusted advisor to trusted advisor from just being a salesperson. But yeah, I wouldn't stress about knowing the competition in intimate detail, but enough to be able to understand their high level sort of benefits.
Absolutely, and I'd echo that. All right, everyone, we've gone over time. Thanks for the questions. Does anyone else have any final questions before we sign off? Amy's put a link to the survey in there. Please take a moment just to click on that and fill it out for us if you could, and give us some feedback on questions for the AMA, and give us some feedback on whether you want to be part of a meetup. If we go to the effort of setting something up, more than happy to do that. Want to build the capability of salespeople. If we do an in-person meetup in Wellington, are you interested in coming along? Darren, thank you so much for bringing your experience and your wisdom and sharing your values with us. Really, really appreciate it. Great to have everyone on the call, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone back next time. All the best.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, David.